Picture biscuits puffing over a bubbling beef casserole. Imagine shrimp and noodles baking under a golden cheese crust. Or the shimmering tuna surprise ring, sparkling like stained glass on a party table. In the 1950s and 1960s, these suppers weren't just meals, they were traditions that brought families together. Most have faded, but their flavors still live in memory. Before we dive in, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. Today we take a look at 12 forgotten Betty Crocker suppers from the 1950s and 1960s. Coming in at number 12 is Lobster Newberg Supreme. In 1956, this luxurious seafood dish symbolized the golden age of American entertaining. It was the kind of recipe a hostess would serve when she wanted to impress, bringing restaurant sophistication right into her dining room. The recipe began with tender chunks of fresh lobster sautéed gently in butter. They were then folded into a velvety sauce made with heavy cream, egg yolks, and just enough sherry or brandy to create that distinctive Newberg flavor. Some families served it in puff pastry shells, while others preferred it over delicate rice pilaf. A sprinkle of paprika and fresh chives added both color and elegance. Back in the mid-1950s, a home cook could prepare this dish for under $8 total, enough to serve 6 people with flair. Today, Lobster Newberg at an upscale seafood restaurant might cost $50 to $55 per serving. Mrs. Charles Peberon of Newport reportedly stunned her dinner guests with this recipe, and a local magazine praised her version as proof that American housewives could rival professional chefs. For many, it wasn't just a meal, it was a statement of sophistication. Coming in at number 11 is Tuna Surprise Ring. In 1959, this dish turned heads at dinner parties, where hostesses competed to bring something unique and eye-catching to the table. Betty Crocker's take used humble canned tuna but transformed it into a shimmering showpiece that felt straight out of a high society luncheon. The base was a gelatin mold, where chunks of tuna, diced celery, and slices of hard-boiled egg were suspended in a lemon-flavored aspic. Once chilled and unmolded, it created a ring that glistened like stained glass on a crystal platter. Surround it with crisp lettuce leaves, and suddenly canned tuna looked like something elegant enough for guests in pearls and gloves. The dish was usually served with homemade mayonnaise flavored with dill to brighten the flavor. Back in 1959, this centerpiece cost under $2 to prepare and could feed an entire table of guests. Today, a retro gelatin salad, if you could even find one, might cost $18 to $20 at a themed vintage dinner event. Mrs. Robert Harrison of Greenwich famously unveiled hers at a spring luncheon, and the society pages declared it the most ingenious dish of the season. It was as much conversation starter as it was food. Coming in at number 10 is Shepherd's Pie Deluxe. In 1955, Betty Crocker elevated a humble meat and potato supper into something that looked refined enough for company. At a time when ground beef was affordable and filling, this recipe gave families a way to serve comfort food with a touch of elegance. The dish began with ground beef browned alongside onions, then seasoned with Worcestershire sauce, fresh thyme, and just enough tomato paste for depth. A colorful layer of peas, carrots, and corn was added before everything was topped with creamy mashed potatoes enriched with butter and cream cheese. Betty's instructions even suggested using a fork to create ridges across the potato topping, which baked into a golden, decorative crust. In the 1950s, this hearty casserole could feed a family of 8 for around $3 total. Today, a single serving of shepherd's pie at a gastropub might cost $18 to $21. Mrs. O'Brien often brought hers to church socials, where guests said it looked like something served in a fine hotel. It was proof that with the right recipe, even comfort food could feel elegant. Coming in at number 9 is Beef Stew Casserole. In 1956, Betty Crocker gave a classic beef stew a twist that turned it into a one-dish wonder. Families loved it because it was hearty enough to satisfy everyone at the table, yet simple enough to prepare on a busy weeknight. The base was a traditional stew, chunks of beef browned for rich flavor, then simmered with carrots, potatoes, celery, and onions in a savory brown gravy. What made this recipe special was the topping. Spoonfuls of biscuit dough placed right over the bubbling stew before it went into the oven. As it baked, the biscuits puffed up golden and crisp, while their bottoms absorbed the flavorful gravy, creating a perfect balance of bread and stew in every bite. Back in the mid-1950s, this casserole cost around $1.50 to feed a family of 6. Today, a beef and biscuit bake at a farmhouse-style restaurant might cost $18 to $20 per plate. Mrs. Jenkins served hers every Wednesday at the local boarding house, and traveling salesmen would adjust their routes just to be in town for her famous stew supper. Coming in at number 8 is ham and scalloped potatoes. In 1954, this dish became the centerpiece of countless Sunday dinners, when 3 generations of a family might gather around one table. It was simple, comforting, and elegant all at once, making it one of Betty Crocker's most beloved casseroles. Thin slices of potato were layered neatly with diced ham, each row topped with a homemade cheese sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and sharp cheddar. The slow baking allowed the potatoes to become creamy and tender, while the ham infused its smoky flavor throughout the dish. The final touch was a sprinkle of paprika on top, which baked into a golden crust that looked as beautiful as it tasted. In the 1950s, this family-sized casserole could be prepared for around $2 and feed 6 to 8 people. Today, a ham and potato gratin at a comfort food restaurant might cost $16 to $18 per serving. Mrs. O'Sullivan proudly served hers to her large Irish-American family, saying it turned any ordinary Sunday into a celebration. For many, this dish wasn't just supper, it was tradition. Coming in at number 7 is pork and bean casserole. In 1956, this dish was the pride of countless Sunday suppers, when humble canned beans were transformed into something hearty enough to impress even the preacher. At a time when budgets were tight, Betty Crocker's recipe showed families how to turn pantry staples into a dish that tasted like it had simmered all day. The base was baked beans straight from the can, but the magic happened in the layering. Strips of bacon, diced onions, and slices of salt pork were tucked between the beans. Then everything was topped with a glaze of brown sugar, mustard, and tomato sauce. As it baked slowly in the oven, the flavors mingled into a sweet and savory masterpiece, with the bacon crisping just enough to perfume the entire kitchen. Back in the mid-1950s, this casserole cost under $1 to prepare for a family. Today, a similar baked bean and pork dish at a barbecue restaurant could cost $12 to $15 per plate. Mrs. Williams at First Baptist Church swore her version could make even the most refined lady lick her spoon clean at the annual church social. Coming in at number 6 is beef and macaroni bake. In 1955, Betty Crocker's test kitchen in Minneapolis perfected this recipe that became a church potluck favorite across the country. It was a dish designed to stretch simple ingredients into something hearty enough for an entire community gathering. The casserole began with ground beef browned alongside onions and seasoned with just salt, pepper, and a pinch of oregano. Cooked elbow macaroni was layered with the beef mixture and a rich tomato sauce made from scratch, then topped with sharp cheddar cheese. As it baked, the cheese melted into a golden crust that tied everything together. Each serving delivered comfort, warmth, and just the right balance of pasta and beef. In the mid-1950s, this dish could feed a hungry family for around $1.25. Today, a beef and pasta bake at a casual diner or restaurant might run $14 to $16 per plate. Mrs. Patterson at the church hall said it was always the first casserole to disappear at Sunday socials, proving that Betty's recipe wasn't just filling, it was unforgettable. Coming in at number 5 is chicken and dumpling casserole. In 1956, Betty Crocker introduced a recipe that quickly became the definition of comfort food for countless American families. When sickness or hard times came, this was the dish mothers turned to. It was hearty, healing, and filled with love. The recipe called for tender chicken pieces baked in a rich, creamy sauce with carrots, celery, and peas. What made it magical were the dumplings, a simple batter of flour, baking powder, milk, and egg dropped by spoonfuls on top of the hot casserole. As it baked, the dumplings steamed into soft, pillowy clouds that practically melted in your mouth, soaking up the creamy chicken filling below. In the mid-1950s, this meal could feed a family of 6 to 8 for under $2. Today, a similar chicken and dumpling bake at a Southern-style restaurant could cost $20 to $22 per serving. Dr. Peterson even claimed the dish had healing powers when his wife made it during his bout with pneumonia. For many, it wasn't just supper, it was medicine for both body and soul. Coming in at number 4 is ham and sweet potato bake. In 1957, this dish was a Sunday dinner staple that filled homes with an aroma both sweet and savory. Families often made it after the holidays, when leftover ham needed a creative twist, and Betty Crocker's recipe turned it into something truly memorable. Thick slices of ham were layered with rounds of sweet potatoes, then baked in a glaze of brown sugar, butter, and just a touch of orange juice. The magic happened in the slow baking. The ham juices mingled with the sugars from the sweet potatoes to create a caramelized glaze that was both rich and comforting. The colors alone, golden potatoes against rosy ham, made the dish look elegant enough for company. Back then, this meal could feed a whole family for under $2.50. Today, a glazed ham and sweet potato entree at a casual restaurant might cost $18 to $20 per serving. Reverend Williams even joked that the dish was heaven sent, while church potlucks always saw empty plates when Mrs. Davis brought hers. It was more than food, it was a celebration of family and fellowship. Coming in at number 3 is beef and biscuit casserole. In 1955, Betty Crocker's test kitchen discovered a clever way to turn day-old roast beef into the highlight of a family supper. At a time when wasting food was unthinkable, this casserole gave leftovers a second life and tasted even better than the original roast. The dish began with chunks of tender beef, carrots, celery, and onions simmered in a rich brown gravy. What set it apart was the topping, spoonfuls of biscuit dough dropped right over the hot mixture. As it baked, the biscuits puffed up golden, their bottoms soaking in the savory gravy while the tops stayed fluffy and light. Each bite was the perfect balance of hearty stew and warm bread. Back in the 1950s, this dish fed a hungry family for less than $1. Today, comfort food restaurants charge $16 to $18 for a beef and biscuit bake that tries to recapture the same magic. Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street said her husband never guessed it started with leftovers, because it tasted like something that had simmered all day. Coming in at number 2 is chicken a la king in pastry shells. In 1952, this elegant dish was the pride of many American households, turning simple leftovers into something that looked straight out of a hotel dining room. At a time when thrift mattered, mothers found ways to make a few pieces of chicken feel like a feast. The recipe called for diced chicken breast, colorful bell peppers, mushrooms, and green peas, all simmered in a velvety white sauce made from scratch. The magic happened when the creamy mixture was ladled into golden puff pastry shells, which Betty Crocker taught home cooks to perfect right in their ovens. Just a dash of paprika and a splash of sherry gave the dish its restaurant-worthy touch. Back then, a family could serve this impressive supper for under $2. enough to feed 6 to 8 people. Today, a similar chicken and pastry dish at an upscale bistro might cost $18 to $22 per plate. Even the Methodist church ladies called it restaurant fancy when Mrs. Thompson brought it to a potluck supper. Proof that Betty's recipes could make any home cook feel like a professional chef. Coming in at number 1 is Tuna Noodle Supreme. In 1958, this dish became a household favorite across America. When families leaned on pantry staples to stretch every dollar, Betty Crocker's recipe transformed a simple can of tuna into something special enough for Sunday supper. It called for wide egg noodles, solid white tuna, cream of mushroom soup, and frozen peas, all crowned with a topping of buttered breadcrumbs. The secret was a splash of lemon juice that brightened every bite. Mothers would cook the noodles just shy of tender, combine everything in a buttered casserole dish, and bake it until the edges turned golden while the center stayed creamy. Back then, this bubbling dish fed 8 people for less than $1.50. Today, a similar tuna casserole at a mid-range restaurant could easily set you back $15 or more per serving. For families in the 50s, it wasn't just affordable, it was comforting, practical, and something everyone could gather around the table to enjoy. Picture biscuits puffing over a bubbling beef casserole. Imagine shrimp and noodles baking under a golden cheese crust. Or the shimmering tuna surprise ring, sparkling like stained glass on a party table. In the 1950s and 1960s, these suppers weren't just meals, they were traditions that brought families together. Most have faded, but their flavors still live in memory. Before we dive in, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. Today we take a look at 12 forgotten Betty Crocker suppers from the 1950s and 1960s.